I was in a conversation recently with someone about current events, and they stopped me and they said, "I'm not really interested in being persuaded on this." And I had to stop, and I'll admit, I've been thinking about that comment quite a bit recently. I'm not sure when some things became up for debate or an opinion. When we're discussing fact or, informing someone about reality or truth, I don't know. I'm struggling with that. When we can point to very concrete reality and say, this happened or this never happened. I don't know when those things are a matter of opinion. Or at least why we wouldn't change our minds. I guess that's what it is. I think that changing your mind about something is admirable. When you're presented with new information and you change a belief or an attitude about something in light of the new information, I don't think that's cowardly. I don't think that means you're a flake or you can't be trusted. I think that means you make decisions about what to believe based on information that is at your disposal. Man, if we can't be humble enough to be persuaded from time to time, to learn from people who have different experiences than we do, I don't know what the point is, especially of education. At the same time, though, we need to be careful when we are engaged in persuasion because, as we've talked about before, our words have power. And that power, when emotion is high, maybe, I don't know what that is for you. There are some topics that send my blood pressure through the roof. There are some topics that I just don't want to talk about. I'm guilty of that too. Where I struggle to keep my emotions in check, whether it's fear or anger, excitement. We need to be careful when we engage in those kinds of conversations and understand that sometimes it's a matter of timing. Maybe things are too real. Or we've been overexposed through the media that we consume. And so it's a bad time to try and have a conversation about something. And we need to be able to respect that. And I think that's what this video is about. Understanding how to engage in persuasion by understanding what persuasion is. So that's what we're going to try and do. We're going to try and answer this question of what is persuasion. We're going to look at 3 different things that make up persuasion, 3 different things that we can appeal to that create persuasive arguments. And by understanding these things, maybe we can have a better understanding of how to engage ethically in persuasion. Not just with what we say, but maybe when we say it, where we say it, what are the times and spaces for engaging. So the first thing that we're going to look at in this attempt to define persuasion is ethos. Ethos is an audience's understanding or sense of the speaker's credibility, their reputation, and their presence. Ethos is why when we hear Bill Nye, the science guy, talking about, science, we don't see it as persuasion. He's informing us. He is credible enough. He has a reputation that we take the information that we hear as information, not as persuasion. It's one of the reasons why you might have teachers who really insist on being called Dr. So-and-so. Their ethos, their sense, the audience's sense of their credibility might be connected to a title. When you don't know the person very well and you hear they're a doctor, that might increase their sense of credibility. So ethos is this idea that a person's credibility is being drawn upon in a way to make the information that they are sharing more understandable and more believable. When you, in your speech making, draw on your ethos, you are drawing on the credibility that you have established. So we know that credibility has three parts: initial, derived, and terminal. When you get up to speak, your audience connects some initial credibility to you. And as you present information, you cite your sources and there's some consistency to your argument, you have derived credibility. And that over time, that derived credibility can lead to terminal credibility. I would say Bill Nye the Science Guy has terminal credibility. His television programming has not been on in quite some time, and yet his credibility remains pretty high. His reputation is pretty good. So he has good terminal credibility. When you pull on that and appeal to your ethos, you are appealing to your credibility, to your reputation, and saying, listen, I've done X, Y, and Z. I've been a doctor for so and so long, or I've been studying this for a really long time, or we have a relationship. I wouldn't lie to you about this. We're pulling on our ethos, our audience's sense of our credibility and reputation. So that's one thing that we can use to try and define persuasion. It's the audience's sense of your credibility, but it's also your audience's sense of emotion, engagement, their values. When you appeal to pathos, the sense of emotion, what you are appealing to is trying to connect for your audience a feeling or an emotion or a state of value that they have to your position, to your claim. You want them to feel something in order for them to better understand where you're coming from, to more easily accept the position that you're trying to make. So you might appeal to their pathos, their sense of emotion or engagement or value by connecting your topic to some event that they could easily emotionally relate to. There's this idea that your language and your words that you choose have emotional charges, that when we say certain things, it evokes an emotion, right? So if I talk about the Challenger explosion, right, this spacecraft that exploded, that probably connects has an emotional charge to it, even if I don't tell an emotional story. So it isn't just, telling your audience to be happy or be sad, but understanding that the language that I choose to use is going to connect with some emotion. And understanding that our audience has different emotional reactions to different things. So it can be volatile, just like emotions can be. When we appeal to pathos, we are attempting to make a bridge between our position and our audience's inner dialogue, their inner emotional reactions. and attempting to create a connection there so that they can see more clearly or feel more clearly what we're talking about. The last of the three different ways that we're looking at persuasion is logos. Logos is our audience's sense of reason, consistency, and truth. So I have this picture here of some math equations, because for me, math is this sense of stability, this sense of consistency. If I can't make an equation balanced, then it's inconsistent, it's illogical. There's something about it that, we tried, but it didn't work. Logos is an appeal to reason. That I appeal to my audience's sense of internal consistency, that if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. That if I can connect for them and get them to follow along in a series of statements or ideas, and they agree at these points, and then I can show some consistency to a grander narrative, to a bigger idea, that's logos, appealing to logos. We can do these different things, ethos, pathos, and logos. We can do them in different ways. When I tell a story about something that happened. Maybe I tell a story about how the country was founded, and I tell a story about our founding fathers and the way that they drafted the Constitution. Telling that story and adding in details about their personal lives and how their personal beliefs impacted what they ended up writing could be a way of using logos. If I talk about who they are as people and how that impacted what they did as representatives of people, there's some consistency to my argument. There's some truth that I have pulled on. If I add detail into that story about the hardships that they faced and what it means to persevere, or what the challenges, very personal or professional challenges that they had to make, sacrifices they had to make, I might be able to pull on pathos, your sense of emotion or your sense of attachment. If I connect that to, why am I talking about it? Well, I've studied this. I've spoken with these researchers, these historians. I'm starting to build up this narrative that is easy to relate to because you can connect emotionally, is consistent, and so is therefore believable, and is coming from a person who is honest. If I've done my research and I have your best interests at heart, then I might be able to persuade you. I want to stop here for a second, because some of you may have this idea that persuasion is inappropriate, or that persuasion is an attempt at control or change, and something that's not our right to change or control. And I want you to know that feeling uncomfortable with persuasion is valid. But I'd encourage you to look at it from a different perspective, that we have an obligation to engage with the world in a way that leads us to a truth, that to stop short at my experience is problematic. I think it's irresponsible. To engage with other people who have had other experiences, I think is important. That's the wrong word. I think it's, you know what? I don't think that you can continue to call yourself a student, a globally engaged citizen, if you just stop with your experience. And there are times where we have to engage in things that might be an opinion, where people have stopped short with just their experience. or they've looked at a data set and they've interpreted it in a certain way. And we have a responsibility to the truth to move them toward perhaps a different interpretation. But we also recognize that we have to engage with this in an ethical way. I'm going to tell you a story. And it's an attempt to utilize these three elements, ethos, pathos, and logos. And I want you to think about the most ethical way of engaging with these elements in the story. So there's this little boy named Tommy. Tommy's 5 or 6 years old and just getting ready to start school this year. And his favorite thing in the world to do the summer before he starts school is to play in his backyard with a big rubber ball. That's his favorite thing. And this big red rubber ball, he can kick it around, he can throw it, and he has such an active imagination. So he's playing out in his backyard in the summer, and his mom, Mary, is inside at their kitchen sink washing some dishes. She's got this really nice window that looks out over the backyard so she can watch Tommy play. And this house is built in the suburbs, but is next to some undeveloped land. So their white picket fence runs along their backyard, and right at the edge of the fence is some wooded areas. And it's such a beautiful scene as she watches Tommy kick the red rubber ball here and there. And she's distracted when the phone rings, and she picks up the phone, and it's her sister, Sarah. And Sarah has 2 boys, Elijah and Michael, who are a bit older than Tommy. And Sarah just got off the phone with Elijah's teacher. And there's some things that are happening over at the school that are a little concerning. And Sarah just wanted to let Mary know as she gets ready to send Tommy to school this next year. Sarah tells Mary all these different things, and the conversation eventually changes as the sisters catch up. And Mary realizes that the water in the sink has gone cold and realizes she's been on the phone for quite some time. And so she says, Sarah, I'll have to talk to you some other time. And she hangs up. And as she looks back out the window, she doesn't see Tommy. And she starts to panic a little bit. Not too much, but trying to think, how long was I on the phone and when did I last see Tommy? So she dries her hands and she goes out to the door and she calls out, Tommy, Tommy, where are you? And she doesn't hear a response, and she looks around and she sees that red rubber ball sitting in the yard all alone. And she starts to worry. Tommy, where are you? She calls out as she runs around the backyard. Maybe he's hiding behind the play set, or maybe he's in the sandbox off to the side, but she can't find Tommy. Her mind immediately goes to the gate at the front of the fence by the side of the house that doesn't always latch right, and she starts to worry. And she runs to the gate and opens it and runs out to the front yard, looking at the street in front of their house, calling out, Tommy, worried that she might see a crumpled body. When she sees nothing, the panic doesn't subside as she thinks about maybe someone came and took him. And she is just emotional at this point. Fear has gripped her and she's screaming, Tommy, Tommy, where are you? And then she hears a scream from the backyard. And as she turns back, she remembers the woods just beyond the fence. And that's where she thinks she's heard this scream. So she goes running back behind the fence into the woods. Tommy, Tommy! And she hears his little voice, "Mommy, Mommy!" And she finds Tommy with his leg in a bear trap. And my persuasive speech is about why we should outlaw bear traps. I want you to think for a second about my appeals to your emotion in that story. You may have felt a sense of panic. Your anxiety or adrenaline might be a little high right now, because I set up some scenarios that are common. This little boy may have been hit in the street or may have been taken. A mother's love for a son, the fear that a mother might feel. All of these things have strong emotional attachments. And so I created for you an opportunity for you to emotionally engage with the story. What did I do with that? Did I treat your emotions well? I don't think I did. I set up some really horrifying things that could happen, and all along sort of drug you along a little bit. And then introduced some random thing that really didn't have anything to do with the fear that I was creating for you. That's not really an ethical way of engaging with our audience's emotions. It's also not a very ethical way of engaging with our audience's sense of reason and consistency. I set up lots of different things that made sense as to be the problem that Mary and Tommy were facing. And that's not the thing that I wanted to convince you of. I included these extraneous details that are not helping you understand the consistency of my argument and are distracting. So I'm not engaging ethically in this example. I am being unethical in my persuasion. I've not explained through my narrative my ethos. I've not connected a reliable sense of logos, and I've pulled on your pathos, your emotions, in a way that I didn't need to. I created in you maybe a sense of anxiety that wasn't fair. So how could I engage with that differently? Well, I could tell a different story. I could connect it back to a more realistic or a more experienced, rather, version of that story that is maybe not tied so closely with an innocent child or a panicked mother. Those are things that can really raise adrenaline. And so I have a responsibility as the speaker in this to recognize my power in my words, in my ethos, pathos, and logos. How do we extend goodwill to our audience then? How do we engage ethically? Well, there's one big theory or principle that I want to introduce you to that I think could help you think about how you're extending goodwill to your audience. And it's called social judgment theory. And the idea here is that we are constantly processing and categorizing the information that we take in against what we already know, believe, and value. When we do that, we can judge new information along different latitudes. We have a latitude of rejection where we hear something, we compare it with what we know, and we say, I don't think that's true, I reject that. We have this latitude of acceptance where we hear something, we compare it with what we believe or value, and we say, that fits, I accept that judgment or evaluation or that information. And then we have this land in between called the latitude of non-commitment, where we take something in and we don't know if it fits with what we already believe or value. Or we could see where it might fit somewhere, but we need more information. This idea, these latitudes, help us understand where our audience is at with our information. And it helps us understand what is reasonable to expect from our audience, because if you set too high of an expectation for your audience, you're going to lose them, and you'll probably lose their respect. That sense of ethos that you may have cultivated and your credibility might be damaged if you don't show that you understand who they are and where they're at. What I mean is, if your audience is all in the latitude of rejection, don't have the goal of them all accepting your position at the end, because that's not possible. Well, it might be possible. It's really improbable. It's really, really hard to get someone to move from a latitude to another latitude. So it's almost impossible to move two latitudes. What's much more likely, and that's what you see down here, is small movement. Moving from one part of latitude of rejection to a part maybe a little bit closer to non-commitment, but maybe still a rejection. We actually have a phrase for this in sort of Christianese, Christian lingo. Planting the seed, right? You plant the seed of evangelism and somebody else comes along and waters the seed. It's maybe a simple way of looking at this social judgment theory, but it's effective. Your audience is probably not going to jump clear over from rejection to acceptance, but you might be able to move them a little bit. And understand that that's okay. When I think back to that conversation that I had where the person told me they weren't interested in being persuaded, my hope is that that conversation is lingering with them too. And maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, maybe not this year, but maybe someday they find themselves moving along this latitude, maybe a little bit closer to acceptance. That they remember who I am, my ethos. That maybe somebody else can come along who can connect it to an emotion better than I could. Connect it with pathos. Or maybe they begin to see the inconsistencies in their own position, and their understanding of logos changes. It's cliche at this point to talk about the division that we see in the world around us, and you all are in a generation that is really struggling with this, much in the same way that generations have struggled before, but maybe it feels more personal for you. I would encourage you to not give up and not lose hope. That when you understand the power that your words have, it is a responsibility, but it's also an empowerment. You have the ability to affect change. When you understand what persuasion is and how to engage ethically with the people that you see around you, you can use the power that your words have to move this world to a better space, to a space that's more welcoming, loving, to a space that creates opportunities for healing. Wouldn't that be something?